Welcome to the Coach's Table podcast, where coaches come to grow personally and professionally through real-world application and online education. What is going on, everybody? Happy Friday today. Wow, it's amazing that the weekend is just right around the corner. Guys, for today's episode, today's guest is an unbelievable guest. And what I mean by that is she is not only a strength and conditioning coach, she is not only a business owner, but she is also an author, which is absolutely outstanding. And there's so many things that you're going to learn from today, from how to be an online business and in person, from what the youth system looks like and how we can make that better, what are things that strength and conditioning coaches need to be better at, and so much more in today's episode. So I'm super excited to welcome Miss Erica Suter. How are you today?
I'm super. I'm really excited to be here and have this discussion.
Yeah, me too. I'm super excited for it too. I think, we were talking a little bit beforehand, but I think what you're doing, not only in the youth space, but just as a whole, is extremely fascinating. And I think there's so many things that people can learn from you. And to just kind of start with that, you've been an online business, your own company for a decade now, over a decade, 11 years actually. Kind of tell me a little bit about how that got started, how you went from, okay, I'm training people to training online to remote to hybrid to now I'm a business owner. What did that whole process look like for you?
It's funny to look back on it, because it's been a very fast 11 years. And I look back to my first day of coaching, and I actually was a skills trainer to start.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so I wasn't in strength, speed, and conditioning yet. I just started training one client, soccer skills, and then it eventually turned into a handful of clients and then teams in just the first year.
Wow.
Yes, and it was all word of mouth.
Okay.
And for me, it was really just about providing a service and just giving these kids the best I could and really getting them a transformation. But after that first year, I started to see a lot of issues in the youth soccer community with overuse and ACL injuries going up. So then that got me back into graduate school to get my degree in exercise science and then my strength and conditioning cert. And I just felt there was a need for the performance side of things. So after I did that, I went full into performance and stopped skills training.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm so glad I did, because this is the piece that a lot of soccer players are missing now, not just for injury resiliency, but for really improving their performance and just raising the ceiling on their speed and strength and their robustness as athletes. So I've been doing that for almost 11 years, and it's just been a really fun journey.
Wow, that's crazy. And being in the field and recognizing soccer, it is a sport that it's a challenge to get people to understand like the importance of training and speed and agility, and why that's so beneficial, because I think a lot of them like I don't want to get too big, right, and it's going to slow me down, or so how do you kind of overcome that? Because I know that's very prevalent in the soccer industry.
Yes, I would say early in my career, like back in 2012, 2013, there were athletes in soccer that were hesitant with it because it wasn't as popular back then. There weren't as many strength coaches. And my whole thing was just getting them to understand that strength helps with the injury resiliency side of things. And it allows them to have muscles that can fire so that the load doesn't go on their ligaments and their joints and result in injury from those forces. And my whole thing with strength is it's what keeps athletes in the game. And then the other piece of soccer that they're missing a lot of is speed. And speed is what changes the game. It's what leads to those goal-scoring moments and being able to get past a defender or run onto a counterattack. And it's what makes the game exciting and electric. And speed is just such a great quality to have. And I've found that my fastest athletes are also the athletes who can be explosive in the final minutes of the game. My slower athletes are the ones who poop out on their team in the final minutes. So speed is really important for having capacity to play and just keeping that intensity through the game. And when I tell players that, they get excited about it and they're just totally bought in. So that's how I've framed everything with my players, and they just love training. And I think it's important for coaches to make the sessions enjoyable. And with us, it's not about running them into the ground or making them sore and tired. It's about building good, efficient, and resilient athletes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that doesn't apply to just soccer. Obviously, that applies to all sports, right? But for you specifically, you work with soccer athletes. That's kind of your main target. But for anybody that's listening, like what Erica is saying is not like what she's saying is that's how all sports should train as well. We should train speed. We should be resilient. We should be robust, right? It's not just solely exclusive to soccer athletes, but for the context of today's discussion, that's who she works with, right? And that's her target audience. So one of the things that in the soccer world, so I train soccer athletes actually at Illinois Springfield. Women's soccer athletes. It was a great time. They were awesome. They were a lot of fun, and we had a lot of laughs, and we had good training. One of the things that I saw with them in regards of training and speed exclusively was they didn't really understand. Like I was attempting to make the connections between the game day like breakaway goals and that speed component, right? Like this is why this is important. Like the faster you are, the more you can separate. And then, the more you can separate, obviously you can get a one-on-one goal or whatever the case may be. And it took a little bit for them to understand that concept until I actually drew it out on a whiteboard, and then I took their film and showed it to them. And then they were like, it like clicked instantly. They're like, that makes so much sense. And then all of a sudden, all they wanted to do was like train speed. So you have a unique take on training speed and speed development. Can you walk me through what that looks like for you and your thought process on like speed development specifically for youth or for soccer as a whole?
Sure. So I find it funny that you call my way unique, right? Because I think the soccer community gets speed totally wrong. It is butchered in so many ways, and my way is not anything special. It's just really optimizing an athlete's ability to fire the central nervous system and to get a stimulus that is top end speed. And with soccer players, they're not getting that enough because their practices have a lot of small-sided games.
Yep.
And with some of the younger teams, they're sharing a field with like another team or two other teams. So they only have like a 30-yard box to work within, maybe even less. So during those practices through the week, they're getting acceleration work and more of the agility work within those games, but they're not getting true max velocity training, which is reaching over 20, 25 meters and running a sprint full speed, max output in less than 6 seconds.
Yep.
And we've even found that with the GPS data we've collected. And a lot of teenage soccer players are getting less than 3% high-speed running throughout the practice and game week.
Wow.
Yes, it's pretty alarming when you look at it, and then you see
Yeah.
that most of their week is spent in the aerobic zone, jogging and walking.
Yep. And then, come game day and the 1, 2, 3, 5 times that they're expected in a game when it really matters to, sprint at max velocity, then what we see, unfortunately, is, injuries occur, right? Because if we've never trained that quality or we're getting it less than 3% of the time in a week, but then we get it 3, 4, 5, 6 times in a game, we're not prepared for that, obviously, like from a physical standpoint.
Right, right. It's just that lack of preparation of the posterior muscles and
Mm-hmm.
really firing the hamstrings and glutes and getting out of those quad dominant movements that they're getting in soccer practice and their shooting
Yeah.
drills and just putting so much load on that side of the body. So I think
Yeah. Oh,
sprinting is the most valuable thing soccer players can do for injury resiliency and obviously performance, because in a
sure.
game, goals are scored from fast, explosive actions off and on the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, the majority of the game is running and jogging, which is like over
Mm-hmm.
90% of the game, but
Yep.
who scores, right? Not the
Right.
athlete who's like trotting along. It's the explosive athlete.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you see that, I think, in, so many times working with soccer, you see that, and it's, they're just who's going to win and who's going to score is the person that can separate. And how do you separate? Well, you have to increase max velocity, right? And we know, or at least we know as coaches, I should say, the athletes maybe not, and that's part of why we're doing this. But we know as coaches is the boat that rises everything is that max velocity, right? So if we can push that threshold higher and higher and higher, or at least get them exposed to it, we know and understand and recognize that they're probably going to perform better in regards of obviously sprint mechanics, obviously sprint speed, injury resiliency, but then like their exposure. So how do you then, if you recognize this with youth systems and with soccer athletes, what does your plan look like to help them increase their max velocity? How often are they doing it a week? What's the yardage? What does that look like for you?
Yes, before I touch on that, I want to expand on your point about how the
Yeah.
max velocity improves acceleration and first step.
Mm,
And I think
mm-hmm.
that's a misconception, is to improve that first step and that separation is we need to do like time 10-yard drills and like shorter burst drills.
Right.
And yes, there's a time and place for that and teaching them how to create horizontal force with that starting stance. But
Yep.
we also need to give that max velocity a stimulus because it's that added stressor to the body to really fire the central nervous system. And when we fire that to its capacity and we train extreme, then, like you said, it raises the boats of all these other things like acceleration
Mm-hmm.
and change of
Mm-hmm.
direction.
Absolutely. And it's the highest stimulus that we can give somebody, right? Like everybody thinks the highest stimulus is that 1 rep max back squat or that 1 rep max hang clean or whatever the case may be. But it's really not, right? Like the highest stimulus that we can provide for athletes is sprinting as fast as they possibly can in hitting their max velocity. Because like you said, it does improve acceleration. It does improve the first step. But let me give people an example. And there's amazing research out there that you can go and look at that show this. I don't remember it off the top of my head. But if I operate at, let's say my max speed is 15 miles an hour, that's where I top out at, which would be relatively slow in all honesty. But if
Yeah.
that's if that's where I operate at, that's really slow. Okay, but if I operate at that, that is the fastest I've ever ran in my entire life. Right? When I actually play the game, I'm not operating at that 15 miles an hour. Right? I might touch that maybe once, maybe twice, maybe a handful of times throughout the entire game. So when I do touch that, it's extremely challenging for my body because I don't consistently get there. So then I operate during the game at like a 13 miles per hour or way lower, right? Because of the fact that that's just what the game shows, right? We're walking, we're jogging, and then I might get some sprints, but it might not be that 100%. What we are saying is if I can push that 15 miles an hour to, let's say, 16, 17, 18, and just get it higher and higher, my operating speed throughout the game is going to be higher as well. So instead of operating at 13 miles per hour, I'm going to operate at 15. So if I just went from, hey, this was my max to now I'm operating here at a 70% effort, that's really good. Now when I need to push that and I can hit that 17, I can hit that 18, I can hit that 19 miles an hour and do that consistently, I might push my operating to 16 miles an hour. Now I'm playing really fast and I have the capacity to do so, which is extremely beneficial. And that's where we start to see people, really break away from competition and be like, that person is really good. They play really fast. They're really strong. And then obviously, the injury resiliency component of that. So for those of you that don't know that research out there, there's a lot out there. I just kind of explained it. And I'm not giving it credit because I can't remember it off the top of my head, but there's amazing research out there for you to show exactly what I just explained.
I love what you just said there, and it's so critical for everyone to remember that the body needs a stimulus that is high intensity and a higher stress than the game to improve. And I think it was Mike Boyle who said, if you want to hinder your youth soccer players' speed, have them join cross country and jog all the time. And I have to credit him for that because it's so true. And a lot of these kids aren't training at max effort. And a lot of the sessions are just busy work, and they're not physical preparation, and they're not really challenging their bodies so that they can adapt and raise the ceiling on that average velocity. And it's so funny that you said that 15 miles per hour is slow, because I totally agree. And what you'll find surprising is when I have new soccer players, teenage girls who do their first assessment with me, they are 15 miles per hour or under coming to me.
Really? Yeah.
Because they haven't had a speed stimulus before. They've been too busy doing skills training, light to moderate training, no proper work to rest time. They haven't been coached running form. They haven't been doing their jumps and power work. It's just so sad that we're just really hindering our soccer players' speed. And when you have a teenager at 15 miles per hour, it's like, dang, we have some catching up to do, right?
Like you're behind.
Yeah, but the good news is people can improve by a few miles per hour by that consistent top end speed stimulus and working on mechanics and jumps with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we kind of went a little bit, but what does that week look like for you then? I think what you're saying is absolutely spot on. So to apply that top end speed stimulus, what should we be thinking about? What guidelines, what distances, what does it look like for you? I think a lot of people are always, we don't want to just say, let's do 400 yards of top end sprinting today. Obviously, that would be terrible. So what do you kind of abide by, and what does that look like for you on a weekly basis?
For in season, we definitely get one time a week speed training. So we tend to do that earlier in the week, just far enough out from the weekend games. And it's just a 10 to 15 minute speed session. Our warm-up is technically mechanical drills like marching, A-skip variations, high knees, prime times, and then we'll go into our jumps. Then we'll go into some accelerations, and then we're prepared to do our over 20 meter top end speed run. And we usually get just 2 to 3 of those maybe one if it's a high load week with like the crazy high school season and 2 games in the week.
Sure. Yeah.
But we found with those sessions that it's just not enough load to exhaust these girls, but it is enough, and it's microdosed enough to improve speed or to at least maintain in season. And so that girls aren't losing their explosiveness and that twitch. And then in the off season, we'll add a second day of speed training. And then those we'll do maybe over 4 sprints, sometimes over 6 towards the end of the off season. And we just double what we did in season.
Okay. Yeah. And then what do you guys use? Because I know you touched on it. What about like a work to rest ratio? I know there's a good rule of thumb out there to utilize, but what do you guys use for the work to rest ratio? And let me pause here for a second. If you're a sport coach, if you're new to strength and conditioning, when you do speed training, and Erica, you can touch on this, you should have a lot of rest.
Yes.
Yes. I think, but go ahead. So what do you look at for work to rest ratios? And we can expand on this because I think this is a huge misconception too.
You can't go wrong with more rest time, right? So we do about like 8 movements within our speed sessions. And it usually is like 4 total minutes of actual work. So that leaves us with like the rest of the time to just rest. And this is where people's impatience ruins their speed, because they'll run their over 20-meter sprint and then they jog back and get back on the line in even just 60 seconds. And that is more of a conditioning drill. And yes, that can be a valuable drill in the off season to build anaerobic capacity. But if we want to train solely speed, then we have to rest longer than 60 seconds after those sprints. I usually have my athletes rest a minimum of 5 minutes between those efforts.
Wow.
And sometimes even more. I mean, we'll just be socializing and we're in no rush, right? I want each sprint to be max effort. And after that 5 seconds of sprinting, my girls should be gassed, like huffing and puffing, they need that over 5 minutes rest. That's what your best effort is. That's you firing the central nervous system to the best of your ability. So the rest has been great for that, but it's also just it's nice for the kids because they enjoy training. They're not there to be sore or exhausted. They're there to improve speed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. And my athletes are the same way. When we do speed, I think we do at least like close to 3 minutes of rest, in all honesty, right? Between bouts, just because of the fact that we're having conversation. And then I like look at my watch and I'm like, oh, okay, like let's go. Let's do this next rep. Just because like you BS with them and, you make fun of them, or you're providing coaching cues, or you're doing both. And it's typically both. But so many coaches, they'll do, a sprint, right? And it's maybe maximal. It's probably sub-maximal in all honesty. And then they'll have them walk back, jog back, and then give them 20 seconds and then do the next one, right? And it's just like they're not even recovered. They're not even close to being recovered, let alone that one wasn't maximal, and now this one is definitely not maximal either, right?
Right.
So, like, what are we doing? We're not getting them better.
You're right, and it comes back to just basic biology and how ATP, the energy used to do that effort, needs to replenish.
Yeah.
But if we want to do a drill where we are sprinting out to like the 50-yard line, and then jogging back in 60 seconds, yeah, it could be a valuable conditioning drill, and that's fine. But
Sure.
I'd like to think of speed and conditioning as a stick shift in a car. You can't train them in the same drill. You can only be in one gear at a time. So if you want to be in the slowest gear and do more aerobic, you're in first gear. And then if you want to be top speed, you're ramping it up into sixth gear. And it's separate. And that's what coaches need to know, and also players, is these are done independently of one another, because that's how the energy systems work.
Right. That's an amazing analogy. That's an amazing analogy. I'm not gonna lie. Okay, if you're listening, go back, listen to that again. Okay, because that was an amazing analogy. She said, "Think of these two as a stick shift in a car." Now, too many people probably don't know what a stick shift is now, but hey, you can go do your research. Okay, but think of it as a stick shift. This was amazing. First gear. If you're in first gear, you're in first gear. If you're in sixth gear, you're in sixth gear. You can't be in both at the same time. So you're either training, the aerobic or the anaerobic component, right? Which might be in that third gear, fourth gear, whatever. Or you're training, you're pushing it in that sixth gear, and we're training the max velocity, right? I think that's a fantastic analogy. I've never heard that analogy before, and I absolutely love it. I'm definitely going to steal that. I'm serious. I think that was absolutely outstanding.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're welcome. So tell us about your book. Super interested. I've seen so many amazing things, positive things about it. So talk to us about that. Where did that come about? What gave you kind of the motivation to write it? And who's it for?
Yes, so my book came out about a year ago, and it's called The Strong Female Athlete. And I wrote it because there wasn't a guidebook out there for working with female athletes. And there's so many specific things to consider, like the menstrual cycle, hormones, nutritional needs. And I just really wanted to have a resource for coaches, players, and parents to just be able to have and know how to perform at a high level, and why female athletes need proper performance training, performance nutrition, and recovery.
That's amazing. So where can they get that? And love to talk more about that. So, okay, let me ask you, first of all, where can they get it?
It's only on Amazon, on Kindle, and paperback.
Okay, awesome. So if you work with female athletes, this is a must read. Okay, so go to Amazon and get it. And then secondarily, I'm actually very interested, because I do work with female athletes as well. Talk to me about some of the specific things you look at. I know you mentioned, the menstrual cycle. I know you mentioned specific hormones. How do you kind of write your training program? Not necessarily. Is it based around that? Is it just those are factors taken into consideration? What does that look like?
Right, and I think this is the million-dollar question. Does the menstrual cycle impact a female athlete's training? Does it impact their injury risk? And the truth is that as far as injury risk, it's very conflicted. There are some female athletes who report that they got injured during one phase, while others say they got injured during another phase. And it's just so unique to each girl. So that means what we need to do is just focus on the controllables in performance training. So making sure our girls have proper motor control. They can decelerate properly. They have a stable trunk and strong hips and abs and obliques and a low back and everything that makes up the core. And then on top of that, we build strength under a progressive strength program. So we want to focus on those things and really empower our female athletes I don't want girls to think that they're like broken because they have a menstrual cycle and that like risk is high. Even if that were the case, even if that were true and we knew that it did impact injuries, we'd still be doing the same thing anyway. We'd still be in the gym getting strong and working on good performance nutrition and recovery.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So it is kind of the $1 million question. Now, I saw something the other day, and I'm interested on your take on this. I think it was actually in the state of Florida that they asked their female athletes to like report their menstrual cycle. Did you see this by any chance?
I did not.
Okay, it was a high school, I believe, but they asked their female athletes like to report their menstrual cycle. Now, I don't ask any of my female athletes to do that. I actually don't want to know personally.
Right.
That's just too. I don't need to know, right? I don't. I'm a male. I don't need to know that information. If they want to talk about themselves, fine. But please, I don't need to know that. So, is that too far then? Right? This school, I think it was a high school. Is that too far? Then I saw a lot of stuff about it. A lot of people are very upset about it. I just don't think that's a needed thing. Do you?
I agree. I think this is when too much science and too much information is bad information. What we need to be focusing on is proper performance training and nutrition and recovery. And I think before we introduce menstrual cycle tracking and technology, we need to nail those down first.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're not good at that right now.
Yeah, exactly. We haven't even gotten to step one with a lot of our girls. And it's really doing them a disservice. And again, it's like if you know for sure that the menstrual phase increases your chance of ACL risk, you should be doing your strength training anyway. Like you should be doing step one anyway. So I don't think there's a point in tracking, especially for youth female athletes, and they need to get that education first about the gym and about proper nutrition before we do that.
Absolutely. So I agree with you 100%. And it's just information that I don't need to know, in all honesty, right? Because you said, we're not even doing the basics first. Like there's big rocks that we need to be concerned on, which are proper training, proper nutrition, proper recovery. And if these aren't even taken care of, then everything else essentially doesn't really matter, right? Everybody, my athletes would be like, oh, what supplements should I take? And I'm like, oh, look, you just need to eat whole food. You need to eat more protein. You need to sleep more, and you need to drink more water. I've got the training piece taken care of because you're working with me, but everything else, we need to get better at that, right? And they're like, but, and I'm like, no, look, let's get this down first, okay? Because we're not even there yet, right? And let's do this not only one day, but for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, right? To make sure that we have that down consistently. And it's so funny because athletes think if they do it for one day, like they're good then, right? And I'm just like, no, like we need to stack weeks and years and months on this. It's really interesting to see.
I agree. And you touched on something really important is like as a male coach, you don't want to know that information. And it can be really awkward for you, but more importantly, it's really awkward for a teenage girl.
Sure.
And it's
absolutely.
Like when I was going through that time as a young girl, I was insecure and awkward to begin with, and everyone is. And if my male coaches knew what phase I was in and I talked to them about my cycle, that's kind of terrifying for a teenage girl. So with male coaches, it's what I've been saying. It's just empower girls with giving them a barbell and a dumbbell and getting them in the gym and talking to them about making sure they're getting their carbs for fuel and they're getting enough calories and they're getting their protein to regulate their hormones and their mood and their recovery and getting healthy fats for their brain function and their joints. And I think that alone is so impactful as opposed to being like, well, you're in this phase, like this is what's going on. Like, I don't care about that really. Like the girl doesn't care. She wants to know solutions. And she wants to be empowered.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more, right? I really couldn't. And and this is a struggle for my male athletes as well. And I work in the collegiate sector, but even if you're a college athlete, I don't want to know that.
Right.
But no, seriously, like I don't. I really don't. But even for my male athletes, and this is really prevalent too with female athletes, but getting them to eat their protein consistently is probably one of the hardest things, right? And I think this is hard for anybody, whether you're a collegiate athlete, youth, or just a person in general, right? Like getting the proper amount of protein consistently on a daily basis to help refuel your body from what you're doing is the number one downfall that I see with all the athletes that I work with because they're just simply not consistently getting enough. Is that something that you see out in the youth aspect or in the teenage realm as well?
100%. Too many times I've heard girls say they had one egg for breakfast.
Yes.
So that's only 6 grams of protein. And meanwhile, I'm over here having 6 eggs, which is 36 grams of protein. Of course, you know, like you don't have to follow what I do, but 1 egg? Come on.
Sure. Yeah.
Most girls should be aiming for at a minimum 20 grams of protein to really reap the benefits of that muscle recovery and that repair after practices, games, and lifting. And even on the hormonal front, protein helps with regulating hormones and making sure you're not going through crazy mood swings during certain parts of your cycle. So I've definitely found girls don't get enough protein, and I encourage them to really look at what they're eating and if they can up that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, this is for everybody, right? Because, I mean, the protein is the struggle, right? And because here's why. Carbs and fats are extremely readily accessible, right? And the protein component, you typically have to prepare. So it takes your time. So, protein, meats and eggs, yogurt, I think is amazing. Are kind of the main ones. And then, fish, which I love as well. And then they're going to go to a supplement, right? That's the next one, the protein powders and stuff, which I'm not against supplements or protein powders or anything like that. But the majority of them needs to come through whole foods. And what I like to shoot is, you said minimum of 20. I completely agree with that. I tell my males minimum of 30. Just because they're typically heavier, just because, they typically weigh more, they typically need more, right? Is what I recommend to them. Like 30 grams every time you eat, no questions asked. Like it's got to be 30 at a minimum. And I actually tend to encourage more than that, but it's like their minimum threshold, right? And women, 20, 25, I think is really good. I think 20 is like the bare minimum, just to trigger that muscle protein synthesis and to help get them going. But if we're just starting out, we can start at 20 and then build from there. Obviously, we don't need to let's go 50 grams every single meal because that's just not sustainable either. So, one thing I'm really interested to kind of talk to you about is the business aspect of what you do. So, you work with people, you work with athletes, soccer athletes, both in person and online. What has been some of your biggest struggles throughout that? What are some of the skills you've gained that you never thought you would have. What's kind of been the learning process of doing this for now over a decade? I mean, you definitely have learned things over that decade.
Oh, that's such an interesting question. So, I think the biggest thing I've learned is I honestly, there's so many things I've learned and failed at.
Sure.
But I think it's important to really niche down and get as good as you can at one thing and serving a specific group. I think businesses run into the issue when they say, "Oh, we do it all. We're holistic. We have all these services." I think it's better to just be clear with what you're doing and who you're working with so that you can really show up and serve for those people and provide an exceptional service that is very specialized. And for me, when I was in my career early on, I tried to do it all. I tried to work with anyone and everyone, and I not only burned out myself, I don't think I was able to show up for people the best I could. And I had to rethink, even just a couple years ago, like who I really wanted to work with and help, and that was the youth female athlete. And I do work with a lot of sports like field hockey, lacrosse, softball, gymnastics, but it is mainly soccer. So I may be niching down even more. I don't know yet. But I do believe I can create the most impact when it is a more specific type of group.
Gotcha.
And I think now too, I don't see work as this stressful thing. I think a lot of coaches definitely fall into burnout. And they're like, "Oh, well, you need like a work-life balance." And for me, I'm like, there's no balance. But I've just niched down so much that I really find so much joy in getting better at my craft and showing up for my clients and like really integrating my work into my life. It's more of a work-life integration.
Absolutely. I was thinking about this concept the other day, the balance concept. And I want to say this, and then I want to acknowledge what you just said, because I think it's extremely incredible. But if you look at something that's balanced, like what is that thing where you have two people on the end and one person hops on, but then the other person, one person goes up and down, right? Like I was thinking about, I can't remember what it's called, but regardless of, if you had a balance, nobody's doing anything, right? So if there's two people that weigh the same amount, right, and they're above the ground, sitting on that saw, I think it was, at a balance, nobody's doing anything. So if you're trying to find balance in your life, you're probably doing nothing. You're probably going nowhere, right? Just because of the fact that there's nothing happening, right? So I really like the work-life integration, just like you said as well. And I think that's really important for people to understand. And I think that's a concept people need to work through themselves. But if you're always trying to find balance in life, I just feel like you're going nowhere, because like you're not doing anything to push the needle forward. And when you push the needle forward, you're going to fall flat on your face. And that's what creates, your progress and your momentum and all that good stuff with it. But I think if you're just constantly trying to find balance, like you're just going to go nowhere in life. And you're just not going to get anything done because nothing is happening, right? And then on top of that, you said niche down, and the classic saying, the riches is in the niches, right? But I think that is extremely important, because it makes your marketing, it makes your messaging, it makes everything clear, super clear. Who do I work with? Female soccer athletes. Awesome. So if you're in that boat, go see it, right? Like, simple, right? Very simple. What do? I work with female soccer athletes. Boom, got it, done. Super simple, no confusion. Doesn't mean you're not going to work with anybody else, but you can focus so much on that one component then everybody's like, cool, I know that she's dedicated to, female soccer athletes, and she's amazing, and we love her, and therefore we're going to pay her, right? How long did it take you to recognize that you need to niche down? Because I think a lot of people try to do very broad stuff. I, as well, and fall victim to that. I'm like, I want to help everybody, right? Because I think I can. Because I think I can help everybody, right? Or at least I believe I can help everybody. But how long did it take you to say, I really just need to niche down?
I think it was after I really burned out. And that was in about,
Really?
2017, 2018. And I was just working crazy, like 10 to 12 hour days. And I was just like, I could be way more efficient with my time, way more impactful with people if I just worked with a specific group. Of course, I want to help everyone, but that's not realistic for coaches. You can't work with every single athlete out there. And yeah, that was when I really shifted my business into just youth female athletes. And I am starting to just work a little bit less, but within those hours, it's a lot more advanced, higher quality, a lot more higher touch with my remote athletes and giving them my all, instead of like spreading myself so thin within a 10 to 12 hour day and kind of pooping out towards the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true, right? Because then you're like, oh, I don't think I got anything done.
Yeah. I do want to be clear, though. I think as new strength coaches, you do have to realize you have to put in long hours. And one issue I see with new strength coaches is they think they're going to make like $70K in an entry-level job, minimal hours, maximal pay, which is just not realistic in our industry. Some strength coaches will never make $70K a year. And I think that's not being taught in these exercise science programs. And strength coaches need to be honest with themselves. Like, do they love it enough to do that? Or if they do want to make more money, they're going to need to find other avenues to make that happen. Whether it's like products, books, or remote training or consulting even. But it takes time to get there for sure.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'll tell you, I think everybody struggles with that, right? Because, you're seeing, and I've talked about this with so many people, I think it's so prevalent, but you're seeing the ceiling rise, right? Where you got $1 million strength coaches, you have $450,000 strength coaches, $600,000 strength coaches, right? And everybody's like, I want that payday, right? Because who doesn't? But we're seeing the floor stay the same, right? And, it's the $30,000 a year job. It's the $40,000 a year job. And I, like, personally, even the $50,000 a year job, right? Like, you're just like, oh my gosh, like, you're just working so hard, not getting paid. And this is where I'm a huge advocate of strength coaches having their services online and learning to market, learning to message, learning to sell, learning to package their services and service their clients online to make that extra money, right? Because of the fact that, like, you probably will need to do that, right? Because a lot of strength coaches won't make $70,000 a year, which is kind of insane. With a master's degree and years of experience and unpaid internships and yada, yada, yada. It's pretty insane. So what's your thoughts on that? Obviously, you're remote, so I'm going to say you think it's a great thing to do, but how would you recommend for strength coaches who want to go online? What should they do? What should that look like? How should they essentially start?
Well, I wouldn't say remote is a guarantee you're going to make more money and make more money fast. Just like any in-person strength coach job, you still have to put in the work and grow. So my recommendation for strength coaches is try to get really good in one place. Whether it's the school you're at, the facility you're at, focus there and build there. Too often, strength coaches bop around from job to job thinking the grass is always greener. But the grass is green where you water it. And if you put in your time, you stay disciplined, maybe you're working for a boss and helping him build his facility, that's great because he's going to want to reinvest in you. So, and with remote, I didn't start until, I think, 2018. I was several years into in-person coaching when I started remote. And I kind of stumbled into it because I got a few DMs like, hey, do you train remote? And people were asking, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to do remote now.
Yeah, you're like, no, but because you asked.
Yeah, and I've really learned that remote's not easy. I think coaches think it's going to be easy. They think it's going to be easy money. But you have to be a really good in-person coach to get away with remote. Remote is a lot of work because you're writing programs, you're checking in weekly, depending on how you set it up. Some people don't do remote that great. But, with my structure, we're checking in weekly. They have access to message me throughout the week, upload their videos, get video feedback. And that's a lot of hours.
Yeah.
It's not this passive income that Tony Robbins promises, like, oh yeah, you can just sit from home and money rolls in.
Yeah.
It's work.
Yeah, you actually have to do the work.
Yeah, definitely. And I love remote, but I keep my clients very small because I want people to do remote who are ready for it. Not every athlete likes it. Some athletes can't work out on their own at home, but then some are really excited about it, and they over communicate with me, and I love that. And it's just such a great two-way relationship from afar. So I recommend coaches really think about remote. It's not this easy endeavor. And if you want something that's quality, you have to put in the work and serve your people.
Yeah, absolutely. So if a coach is looking to go remote, right? Let's say they don't have the DMs. Let's say they don't have the DMs that people are asking to do remote coaching. Let's just say they want to start it and they want people to know about it, right? How would you recommend for them to structure it? Would you recommend for them to do weekly check-ins? You talked about video upload, as in the athletes record themselves doing the reps and sets and upload it? How would you recommend if you were to start over again from the online standpoint of what you have found to be successful? What would you recommend for those coaches that want to do that to start to make a little bit more?
Sure, and I got to answer this, and then I got to run. I'm so sorry.
Yep. No worries. You're totally fine.
I think a lot of people get caught up in the details. Oh, well, what platform should I use? How should I take payments?
Sure.
The first thing you need to do is just tell people you're doing it. Tell your Instagram, tell your email list, maybe even tell your neighborhood. I'm sure there's someone there who wants to train with you because they can't see you in person and commute. So you just have to let people know and be consistent with that messaging. I think coaches are too afraid to sell, but if it's a quality service and you're excited about your program, it shouldn't be an issue for you to tell people about it because it's going to transform an athlete and really impact them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So just
get started. Just one client and serve them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then ask them to refer you to somebody else. And then that's how you grow. Word of mouth is the best form of marketing. So,
yes.
Well, Erica, hey, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your input, your expertise. If you are not following Erica, where can they follow you?
I'm most active on Twitter at Fit Soccer Queen, and I see my social media as philanthropy and just free content. So be sure to check it out because I love giving on there. check it out because I love giving on there.
There you go. So go follow her on Twitter. That's where she's most active. If you need to reach out to her, shoot her a message. If you want to work with her, if you're a female soccer athlete and you want to work with her, reach out to her. Thank you for your time so much today. I really appreciate it. If you haven't purchased her book, go buy her book. I know that you will benefit greatly from it. So, Erica, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. I hope you have a great day and a great weekend. And just, guys, we'll see you guys later.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.